This video is about an alternate cast-on for 2x2 industrial ribbing, which is used in this Summer Garden Cardigan. Details about the ribbing itself are covered in a separate video. This is about making a chain stitch cast-on, which is a little bit prettier. In this cast-on, there is one stitch that is not actually cast on. We let the machine do it automatically. And that does create a tiny bit of a lacy look at the hem. The most obvious example of this is marked with the arrow on the picture that you're looking at. I'm going to start with the yarn already threaded through the eyelet and pull what will be the working yarn through, knot a loop, and begin a chain stitch cast on. And work all the way across the bed. I've got the needles all the way forward because it's easy to work around the shanks. Now, as you know, a Passap can't knit back from here. So I will manually knit the first row after this. If I were working on a Japanese machine, I could knit one stockinette row with the carriage after this cast on and then proceed. I'm almost to the other side of the needle span. I'll hang the last loop on the end needle. I'm working with a double strand of yarn and it tried to split on me, so I need not to let that happen. Now make sure the first batch of needle latches is open because I'm going to manually pull back and make a stitch on each needle all the way across, making them as evenly as possible. It's actually pretty easy because my right hand, which is on the back bed where I'm working, can feel where the last needle butt ended up and adjust the new one I'm pulling back to match up with it. So all the way across like this. Okay, there's a row of chain stitches across. And now it's time to begin transferring for the rib. I'm going to put the first one on the left onto the front bed. Oops, I used the wrong needle. There we go. Now, 2 stay on the main bed, transfer 1 across. So this is the beginning part of getting there to be the correct number of stitches. This will get the correct number onto the back bed. That was a little stray strand and I've just given it a home. Working all the way across. Transfer 1, skip 2, transfer 1, skip 2. This will be the same whether you are working on a Passap or on any other brand of machine, except for one difference. On any other brand of machine, I really should have started in waste yarn and hung my ribber comb and weights in the waist, because once I get transferred across, working with the ribber does not go well on any machine except a Passap without the comb and weights. On the Passap, I sometimes use them, but they are more optional because Passaps have those strippers that push the stitches down. So all the way across, transferring 1, skipping 2, and so on all the way. Everything is correctly transferred, but now everywhere we have 1 needle over here on the front bed, we actually want 2, except this single on the left. That is in place just because of the needle rule for Passaps, that the left working stitch should be on the front bed and the right working stitch should be on the back bed. They just knit off better if you follow that rule. So we're going to place some empties into work all the way across the bed. Now we have 2 needles in work on the back, 2 on the front, 2 on the back, 2 on the front, just as we should for this 2x2 industrial rib. However, I'm still set so some needles will crash into each other. Bang, bang, no good. So this is where we need to rack. Wrong direction. Now, this one is still on the left front, but then there are 2 that will pass it without a problem. And these 2 will pass the next batch, and so on. That's how it needs to be. For this particular project, I'm using 64 stitches. And that meant that when I got to this end, I had stitches sticking out at the right. Passaps don't care for that, so I've placed a needle into work at the right. And I could just get rid of it after knitting the ribbing, just move it over. What I actually normally do during this situation is skip the first increase on this side for the sleeve. So if there's any, and that's what I'm knitting, if there's any increasing to be done, there's an easy way to get around the issue, and that's it. Because we started by pulling the main yarn through the feeding eyelet on the Passap, it now is continuous up through the normal threading, and I don't have an extra yarn tail. This would not be something you had to consider as much on a machine that uses other ways of threading. But basically, the process is going to be the same. You wouldn't have to consider that, but you would have had to add some weights and waste yarn and then a row of ravel cord before doing this step where we chained and then manually knitted a row, or let the carriage knit it, because on some machines that'll work, and did our transferring. So there are trade-offs. And now we should be able to set both beds for normal knitting, knit across, and ta-da. Every one of those stitches that I placed in work that doesn't have a stitch on it now has a loop of yarn on it. And because this is a kind of ribbing and the stitches are going to zig and zag, it'll go ahead and make a stitch next time. See, that's a complete stitch. That's not, and that is. So that will allow this one that is not complete to go ahead and become complete with one more pass. Here's one of the stitches that just picked up a loop. And now you can see it's a complete stitch. You may be able to see this one a little better. Of the pair, the one in the left side of your view was the one that was not a cast-on stitch that we allowed the machine to make on its own. From now on, we just knit.